You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Edit out all the beginning part of us staring at fucking random things trying to figure out what the hell that noise was, but here we are. Hi.
Hello.
So, I won't say Cassity.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
So, I am Cassity Norris. I am a healing intuitive. This has been a new journey for me as of like the last 2.5 years. I've been on this like spiritual awakening, if you want to call it that. Really finding where my heart pulls me and where things call for me. And I'm just excited to be here on the ride with you guys and explore where this is going to take us.
I totally forgot to ask you about time. Are you good on time as far as like...
Yeah.
Okay.
Wide open.
Awesome.
Good. Babe, why don't you sit, like, how did you find her?
That's what I was going to say. I was like, do you know how we came?
I'm not even exactly sure.
Yeah,
I just
sure.
know the connection, like, once it was made, I was like, whoa. You feel so familiar to me already, but I'm not sure how that came about. I do know it was on Facebook, but I don't know if I had added you or like...
I know, because it was awesome, because you always stood out to me too. So you've had like just good energy and it's been awesome. So there was a 5-day challenge that happened September of last year.
Okay.
It was just one of those Facebook, 5-day challenge, and we were both on that group.
Okay.
And I went on to do the 3-month. You didn't do that. And you added me.
Okay.
And I was like, all right. And I just saw your stuff pop up. I'm like, I like what she does. I like what she does.
Yeah.
And then you did this incredible, vulnerable live that I'm like, oh, I love her. We've got to talk. And so we just kind of went from there. So that's how, according to my memory, that's how we started.
That video was definitely... So it was a 5-day intensive then?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
That sounds right.
So that was fun. That's how we started off. And then, like I said, the way you poured your heart out, I don't think I've seen anybody that raw on social media, but I'm looking like all of the chambers in my brain are trying to find it. And I can't think of one that I've seen that has shown up in that much vulnerability and rawness that you did. And I was just like, okay.
Thank you.
Do you know which one she's talking about?
Yeah, it was my body shaming video. And I don't know about you guys, but like for social media, my whole life growing up, I was told not to show the things that you don't want people to see. And so I have all this built up shame that I've had for years and years and years. And I just feel this calling to finally let it all go and just let myself shine, even if it's messy, even if I think that it's a weakness. And it's teaching me how to learn to love myself in a way. And so that video was really, really hard for me. It was super vulnerable, and it was hard for me to watch it back at first because it was so vulnerable, and I had to kind of step away and like not watch the comments and not see what people were saying, and then revisit it and recognize the power that held for me personally. And then it also helped me to connect with others out there, and it opened my eyes to just how often we hold body shame. And it's not just women. Women do suffer from it a lot, but it actually opened my eyes up to body shame for men. And just my whole journey of I've started to recognize my superpower is really allowing myself to share those vulnerabilities, and that's how I can make true authentic connections and change the world in a way, Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
So did you grow up out here, or were you raised somewhere else?
So I grew up in Orem. I was raised LDS, so I was in the church. And then it never felt right to me. Like growing up, it just never felt like it called to me. It didn't resonate. And so in the last 5 years of this awakening, if you want to call it that, I've started to ask, where does my heart really pull me? It's not pulling me in religion. It's not pulling me in all these little boxes that I've put myself in. It's pulling me into the unknown. It's pulling me into the void. It's pulling me into trusting that I'm divinely guided and just opening myself up to be brave enough to fall into it and to surrender into it. And that's kind of the theme that I have going for this year specifically, is to surrender into the unknown. And it's terrifying in a lot of ways, but it's been so magical. It's helped me open my heart. It's helped me to start connecting to people like you guys. And it's been an awesome journey for sure. Yeah.
So you were born and raised here in Utah. How Mormon were you?
So my older 2 siblings are strictly LDS. My mom was raised LDS and so was my father, but my mother went back to church around the age of like 14, 15 for me. So when she went back to the church, she hit it hard. Like she was by the book, in your face about it, preaching to you all the time about it. And at that age, for me, that was like a time where you're trying to figure out how to be your own person. You're your own teenager. You're trying to figure out what life's about. And so I went from being kind of in a house where things were more open and you were able to not be so strict to, this is what I say, you must do it. There's no playing with boundaries. There's no exploring yourself. I was raised in a house where you weren't honest ever about what you were going through. You didn't talk about your emotions. And it really ended up coming to a point where I found myself dividing and splitting almost in like 2 different personalities because I had all this shame and all this shadow that I had been pushing down about myself. And I started to notice that when I was with people, I was fitting the people that I was with. So I was giving them the Cassity that I thought they wanted to see, whether it was Cassity A, Cassity B, Cassity C. I was showing up for how I interpreted that they wanted to see me. And I got really sick of that because when you're not grounded in yourself and you're not centered in yourself, you lose yourself. And if you lose yourself, everything out there is going to be 10 times harder for you. So I ended up having to just come to this place of letting go of the religion, letting go of the boxes, letting go of everything that I've been taught and that I've known and that's comfortable for me, and just finding my own spirituality instead of religion. So my mother was super religious. My father was not. We ended up...
Were you guys like... I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to slow down a little bit because I've been fascinated lately by... Steph and I both grew up in this state as well. Mm-hmm. I was actually born and raised in this little town that we're in now. Okay. Both of us came from LDS backgrounds, but neither one of us were super active. But lately what I've been looking at, and I've been doing a lot of like listening to, there's a podcast called Mormon Stories Podcast and some other ones that I've been really like fascinated by, and listening to people's stories in regards to the church and in regards to the process of whether it's leaving the church or some people are still in the church, or just the whole space of what the church is and does, especially here in this state, even though, you know, it's kind of the same. Well, the church is different elsewhere, but so I'm fascinated by what am I trying to say? It's like I want to pick apart a little bit more about your experience with the church and how you felt like it shaped your adolescence and whether it did or didn't. I used to think, just to give you a little bit of direction, I guess, or kind of what I'm talking about. I used to be under the assumption like my story would have been, yes, I was raised Mormon, I was baptized, we weren't super active, like very general Jack Mormon type family that hardly did anything other than go to church just for the community aspect of it. And around the age of 9 or 10, we just stopped going to church and that was it. I didn't really have anything else to do with it and never really bothered to question it. It just didn't bother me at all. I moved on. And that was kind of my story for a really long time until I really started to look at it much more and started to really realize how much of a role it played in my shaping and molding because of the community that I was raised in and the mindset and all of my friends, and not just my friends that I hung out with, but the community at large. And it's different here because it's such a small town, such a like really small town, super Mormon, super white, super tight-knit community. So, but I think that Utah in general tends to have a lot of those similarities across the board, regardless of the size of the community or anything like that. So that's my question, is to kind of, you know, you said when you were like 14 or 15, your mom went back to church and got really, you know, dove headfirst into it. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, was it you guys were Mormon, but we didn't go to church, or was it something that was even really a factor? So
my whole life, we went to church. My dad never went with us, but the rest of us always went. And my brother kind of led the way, and he went on a mission. And once he went on a mission, that sparked my mom to be like, okay, I need to get back into this. And I think she originally did it to show support for him. So we weren't allowed to miss church. We had to go to church every week. I remember voicing around like 12 or 13 that I didn't want to go anymore. And my mom saying, well, that's too bad. You have to. Yeah. And so, it got to the point where she was trying to control who I was so deeply around the rules of what you're taught in church, to the point that she got so stressed out because she felt I was falling off the deep end that I ended up actually going to a ranch in Arizona and having to work at this ranch in Arizona by myself with these people that I didn't know. And that was her way of trying to save me. But in my experience, that actually was the thing that broke my back. Like, it broke my inner compass of knowing what's right and wrong, because I was forced in the situation to just play the game or I wasn't ever going to come home, type of thing.
How old were you?
Wow.
15.
15?
Yeah.
What type of ranch? Like,
It was a cattle ranch.
okay.
Yeah. I went down there. It was in St. John's, Arizona. Super small town. They only have a one stoplight. And I went from a 4A school to a 2A school. They didn't tell me until the day I was going down there. So all my friends didn't know where I went. I just had like disappeared off the face of the earth. And for the first month that I was down there, they would call and want to talk to me and check up and see how I was doing. But I was so angry. I like didn't want anything to do with them.
Like your parents?
Mm-hmm. And about 2 months into it, I finally was like, okay, just embrace this game. Do it as long as you need to do it and get out when you can get out. And so I noticed that point in my life is really where my inner compass got completely destroyed. Because when I came back from that experience, from that moment going forward, I just gave them what they wanted to see. I showed them the sides of me that they wanted to see. And that's where my shadow ultimately grew the deepest, is because I had so much shame about all these aspects of who I was.
What was the purpose of, like, this fascinates me.
Yeah.
At the age of 15, your parents shipped you off to some cattle ranch down in Arizona. Mm-hmm. For what reason? Like, what was going on in your life at that point that they felt that was going to be the thing that saved you?
So my older two siblings were straight A students. They didn't enjoy social life. They didn't have any of that going on. I showed up and I gave my parents a run for my money. I was wild. I loved attention. I loved boys. And so I think what really started worrying them is I was interested in boys. They didn't want me to date because you're not supposed to date until you're 16. And I had a boyfriend that I ended up getting when I was 15. And so he started to pick me up from school every day. And my parents were like, no, we're not having this. So it was really simple things that just amplified in my mother's eyes. And if I look back at it, it makes so much sense to me now. But she thought I was up to all these things that I wasn't up to. So she thought I was drinking. She thought I was partying. She thought I was smoking weed. I was having sex. That was something that was a huge deal for them. And so my parents' idea was, if we can work it out of her, she'll stop being this way. Yeah.
And go ahead.
Sorry. We're like, whoa.
Is it like a family friend or?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like, how did they know these people?
So they had a house next to our house growing up. Their parents had bought it, and all their kids that were going to college at BYU would stay in that house for the years that they would go to BYU, and then they'd go back down to the ranch. And so I don't know how this came to be, but they ended up like figuring this out behind the scenes. And so it was these neighbors that had lived next to us. So I was familiar with some of their kids, but it was completely like unknown. I didn't really know them. And so I was very isolated. And I think that's ultimately what ended up being the thing, where I was like, I'm on this farm. I can't even leave this ranch area. The town is 15 miles away from where I'm actually living. And so in order to even get to the town or be able to make friends, I have to play this game, or I am trapped on this piece of land by myself. And it was an experience for sure. Yeah.
How long were you there?
I was there for 6 months.
Wow.
Wow. Mm-hmm. What was coming home like?
Ooh, okay. So during this time, my grandfather passed away. And I remember being really brokenhearted about that, because I was really close with him. He was living with us before I went to Arizona. And they wouldn't let me come home for the funeral. So I remember being really heartbroken about that. And then finally at Christmas time, they allowed me to come home. And so there was a part of me around this time that was really excited, because I had missed my family and I had missed my friends. But it was really emotional. Like, that's how I know my compass was broken, as I came back and it really was like I was numb. I was not, it's almost like the disassociation had happened so deeply that I didn't even fully feel present when I came back. So it was a very confusing time for me, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much memory do you have of being down there?
I definitely have blocked out some things, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goodness.
Do you have kids?
I have one daughter. She passed away. That happened. That's actually the reason I had this whole awakening of trying to figure out who I was. She passed away, and I found myself in this spot of, what is this life about? Are you going to just continue to get by, or are we going to start to experience and to live it? And so she was my ultimate catalyst to my way back to myself. But I was pregnant with her, and she ended up coming super early, premature. It was undiagnosed preeclampsia, and I had gone to the doctors a couple days before she was delivered early, and I was swollen. My feet were so swollen I couldn't walk. I could tell something was wrong, and the doctor just ended up saying, "You're dehydrated. You need to drink more water." So 2 or 3 days after that, I ended up having 2 grand mal seizures. Luckily, my husband was home, so he called the ambulance. We ended up going to the hospital, and they ended up having to take her out because of the condition that I was in. So she was born under a pound. She was here for 2 months, and it was in the NICU the entire time. And then after that 2 months is when she passed away. So I haven't had kids since then. I don't know if I'm going to be honest with you. But
the reason I asked was, first off, that's terrible.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom. But I'm sitting there thinking about a 15-year-old getting shipped off to a cattle ranch in the middle of, bumfuck Arizona nowhere.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about the parents, and because we have too many kids.
No, we don't.
We don't have too many kids. They drive us crazy, though. And there's been plenty of times as teenagers, as they went through their teenage years and are still going through their teenage years, that seems like a good idea to me. That I'm like, let's go ahead and send them off somewhere but
you would never do it.
I would never do it.
Like the actual, like you have a thought of a moment of frustration.
So it just makes me fascinated to think about what your parents were thinking and the impetus for it, and how they, eventually got to the point where like, this is a good idea. Mm-hmm. And then like sticking with it for I just can't even imagine sticking with it for 6 months. And
over boys, over attitude,
so
over like just that religion aspect of how.
Mm-hmm. If I would sleep past like 9 p.m. or 9 a.m., my mom would come down to my room and she'd be like, "Are you on drugs? You're sleeping way too late." Like this is how crazy it had gotten. And I want to just stop and pause and say she's come such a long way since then.
Okay. I was gonna.
Yes. But that's the reality of what I was raised in. And it was a constant, from my perspective, what was happening was I was tapping into my mom's shadow of things that she was still suppressing within herself. Mm-hmm. So she was amplifying all these things, seeing in her perspective that they were happening. And my dad came into it, and he was just so sick of the tension and the chaos and the whatnot that he was like, fine, whatever you want to do, whatever this is going to fix this, I'm on board with it. And there were steps up until this moment of me going to the ranch where I had gone and I had worked on fences with him, and I had dug rocks out with him. So my dad's way of getting someone to follow guidelines is you work it out of them. He's always believed that. He still believes that. So I did have these little steps of like, I would have to go work with him for a week and put up fences. And that was my disciplinary action. And they just wanted to get me out of my rebellious stage and into structure. And the ranch was ultimately the big thing that happened from those steps that like building up to it.
As an adult, when you've had processing, I'm sure there's still a lot of processing to happen with that, but where you're on that journey, what does that situation look like to you now?
Oh, my heart goes out so deeply for my mom. I have so much compassion for her. Looking back at that, there was a lot of anger in the beginning stages because I would start to understand it and uncover it. And I'd be like, why couldn't you just deal with your shit in that moment? And I would have understood it. There's other things that happened as well that played into this, but there's dynamics between my siblings, and my siblings would get different treatment than me. And there were some shameful secrets that she was holding that had to do with my other siblings, which is why my other siblings were getting treated amazing and getting all this attention and all these things. And if I would have understood that in that moment and known that for what it was, I think it would have helped me not be so angry. But I definitely had to work through anger first. And now I'm in this place of compassion to how heartbreaking it is that she didn't feel supported to be herself, that she wasn't able to accept traits about her. And so I feel like it almost like trickled to me for me to be a mirror back to her about the things that she's been suppressing. That's kind of where I'm sitting in it right now.
Okay.
So my relationship with my mom has actually become really beautiful in a lot of ways. She's also kind of been doing this like awakening thing. She found yoga. And yoga was ultimately the thing that started to open her mind up to like, oh, there's truth in other things just besides this religion. And she's actually gotten to the point where she's kind of falling more away from the church, and she's open to the truths of more things. Like she's getting into like Buddhism and all these different things. And so that's been kind of fun for her to see, for me to see that, because we're on this journey kind of together. But I do notice that I have to keep my journey also separate from her, because we have this codependency thing happening here, where she likes to play off of me, and like I'm her go-to person that holds her stuff for her. And so there's been this like boundary thing happening with us, and like me learning how to allow her to be there for me and be there for each other, but not allow her to come into my space or take control over my space, if that makes sense. So,
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Neither of us have any issues with our mothers. None whatsoever. Super normal relationships. No issues.
Yeah, there's so much to be said about what you're seeing on how you recognize she was working out stuff like through you.
Do you think she had a wild teenage life, like growing? Do you think
100%.
she went through all that stuff and then was just incredibly fearful when she started to notice some of the same things? Or
Yeah, so I actually remember a defining moment of when her and I had this moment when I was in junior high, and I remember coming home from a party. And at this party, she doesn't know, but there was weed there. And so I just remember asking her, and I said, Mom, did you ever smoke weed? And she looked at me and she said no. And the second she said no, I felt the lie. And so I was just like, from that moment moving forward into my teen years, I knew I couldn't come to her. I knew I couldn't trust her. I knew she wouldn't be there for me. And so that was the defining moment for me to be like, okay, she's not there for me. But now I'm sitting there and I'm able to look back, and we've gotten to this place where she starts telling me all these different things. Like she's tried acid, she's partied, she traveled the world and like couch surfed. But these were all things that she was so afraid to tell me, because she thought if she told me these things about her, that it would open the door and tell me it's okay to do these things. And so she herself was carrying so much shame about all these actions that she had because her parents had told her the same things. She actually ended up being in a marriage because her mother ultimately was like, this guy is the best guy for you. And he was a church-going guy. That marriage didn't last very long. They got separated after a couple months. But I look back at that pattern now, and I'm like, there's a very deep pattern here of the women in my family not following their hearts, just suppressing who they are. And so it really it holds a lot of magic, and for me to be able to see all these things that we're changing. We don't need to keep carrying these traits, I
like the way that you put that, because I don't think it's a long-standing tradition in just your family. I think women tend to do that in general across the board throughout society. Suppress themselves, suppress who they are, and the capacity that they have, and all sorts of different things. Can you relate?
Maybe a little bit. And then here comes the generational breakers, the ones that are going to disrupt those patterns and say nope.
I definitely can feel the change happening. Like I'm seeing it everywhere around me, and it's so beautiful to just see it popping up everywhere. It's starting to pop up everywhere, and it's starting to become made known more clearly. Like religion is another good aspect of this, where growing up, I was in this religion and I wasn't made aware of the fact that women had been suppressed in so many ways. And then you start to look at the actual history going back to it, and you realize that goddesses have been removed and the men have been put in. And it makes me laugh, because I remember growing up, there was a woman in my ward that was she ended up leaving the church ultimately because she couldn't hold the priesthood. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what? I can't believe that. How dare you cause waves? And now I'm like, hell yes. Yeah. The women have so much power, much power. And I'm starting to discover it and uncover it and recognize it.
Are your parents still together?
They are. Yeah.
Is your dad still just not active at all?
He's not active. He's super supportive in my journey because he's seen the shifts in me. He's seen the changes. At first, he was super weirded out. He's like, you're going really far out there. But as soon as he was able to see my mental state change, my emotional state change. And I think another thing too is he's always wanted me to be my own person. So the fact that I was struggling so hard to be my own person, he never understood why. And I think the fact that I'm able to like start embracing this, he's like, hell yeah, get it while you can, go follow what you need. So he's been really supportive, and my mom's actually really supportive in my journey as well. It's just with her, there's that boundary of she likes to put our energies together more often than she realizes, and she likes to feed off of me in a way. So I've had to be aware and just observant in those situations. And I love her so deeply, but there's more boundary issues with my mother. My father respects my space 100%. Yeah.
How's your relationship with your siblings?
So our family is very interesting. All of us are kind of our own people. We don't really call each other. We don't really talk that much. My older brother's super LDS. He actually moved out to Missouri because he believes that that's where Jesus is going to come.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's out there right now. And we're not very close, but when we get together, you know, it's good. My older sister doesn't understand me, but I still love her and hold compassion for her. And my little sister is probably the one most like me. So her and I, when we really are getting along really good, we're getting along really good. But when we fight, we really fight. And she's probably my number one person that I can go to and like actually lay things out on the table and be honest and open with her. And she accepts me for who I am. With my older siblings, I kind of feel like I'm able to do that for them, but they're not able to do that for me. So I kind of have to limit my time that I spend with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, why Missouri? Why is that? Like,
you know,
how does that happen?
I honestly wish I could understand it. I know there's like weird biblical things that he believes, and I don't get into it with him just because I'm not really interested.
Yeah.
I know the water there is like a big deal, and I know that there's also a lot of other people from Utah. So I drove out there to visit him actually, just to see like he got 80 acres of land for like dirt cheap, and I was like, I got to go out there. I got to see what this is all about. So I went out there, and he ended up telling me, he's like, if you have Utah plates, like people get really upset at you because they know automatically that you're LDS and they don't want you to buy land here. So I guess a lot of people are buying land out there. I don't know exactly the whys, but he was led there by his exploration of the LDS church, and he firmly believes that. So that's interesting. I adore him. He is his own quirky, weird person, but he definitely has his own beliefs about how things are going to go down. And it's interesting to watch. He's definitely like my sibling that gives me the most entertainment. If you can look at it as entertainment, then it won't like trigger you, you know, you can play with it and have fun with it. So you're cracking up over there.
I'm sitting there just imagining, you can see a bunch of Mormons buying up land in Missouri because that's where the second coming is going to be. That makes total sense to me. Yeah. That sounds super Mormon. Yeah.
It does, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'm going to start Googling.
So you said you've been on this journey for 2 years, was it? 2.5 years?
Yeah. So my daughter passed away 5 years ago. And after
Hold on. It feels like you're going super fast.
I just asked her a question.
I know. That's okay.
You can slow me down. I do go fast.
Yeah. So just take a deep breath. Hopefully you're kind of comfortable, settled into the space a little bit. My name's Craig. This is Stephanie.
Hi, guys.
It's a little podcast. I just want you to feel comfortable and be able to kind of just relax.
Okay.
Since you're not going so fast.
Still.
How does that feel? Just curious. I know my reaction to that. So I'm just curious what your reaction is when he just like physically like, okay.
I'm totally fine with it.
You're totally fine with that. I don't give him the same courtesy when he's like, all right, we need to slow down. I'm like, don't talk too slow.
Sometimes I get going on rolls and like it's almost like I channel it in a way. I don't know if that's going to make sense to you, but I'll get information coming through so quick that I have to spit it out as it's coming or I lose it. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing I do. So if I have to slow down, I totally get it.
Yeah.
See, don't slow me down.
Okay.
I lose it.
So spiritual awakening.
Your daughter passed 5
She passed 5 years ago. And I ended up actually turning to pills because everyone was concerned about me. Everyone was worried about me. And I had the mindset still of I can't let people see me being a mess. So I had gone from this place of not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to see people, like straight up, like not taking care of myself, completely depressed. And I thought that this little magical pill was going to help everything disappear and go away. And it ended up pulling me in even deeper. I got to the point where I ultimately was going to lose my marriage. I was going to lose my house. I was going to lose everything I had ever wanted in life. And I just had to do a hard look in the mirror and say, this is where you're headed, or is this where you want to go? And I knew the answer was no. So the next day I ended up just telling every single person about the shame that I had had, and not even my husband was aware that I had had this addiction going on for 2.5 years. Wow. That's how good I had gotten at hiding it. So everyone, once I had told them, they were all shocked. But then once I told them, they're like, oh, that makes so much sense why you've pulled away and you're not coming around and you're more closed off than ever. So once I got off of the pills is really where the work started to happen, because I wasn't numbing out anymore. I wasn't pretending anymore. I had to sit with myself and the grief and the sadness and the layers of all the years of things that I have been pushing down. So that's really where it started for me, is when I was able to start getting off the pills and like be raw with it.
You just went from hiding everything to 100% vulnerability.
Yeah, and I actually...
That is amazing. That's huge.
Yeah, I actually blasted that one on Facebook too.
Wow.
So that one was more of a post, but it was like, hey, listen, this is my secret that I've been carrying for 2.5 years. I've been in the darkness, and I remember the picture that I used, and it was a seed that had been planted in the dirt. And it was along the lines of, you think it's dark, you think it's scary, but it's really just the beginning of your growth that's about to happen. And so once I was able to see myself as that seed, I was like, I don't need to be shameful that I've been in this spot. Wow. So it was really terrifying. My dad actually had the reaction that surprised me the most. He was probably one of the most, I was scared the most to tell him, because we had addiction in our family. And the opinions that he had about people who had addiction in our family were very cold, very bitter, he doesn't have patience for it. So when I came to him and I said, hey, Dad, I haven't been coming around and here's why. He said to me, that's okay. We all have our stuff. And I just remember thinking, holy shit, that was totally opposite of what I thought I was going to get. And just that being shown that softness from him really kind of gave me the courage to continue to let everyone else know.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's your dad.
Yeah.
That experience. I can't even wrap my head around that. Like, wow. I'm very glad that that's how that came out. And then that was your...
Yeah.
I can now tell everybody.
Yes.
It's messy, though.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what did it look like when it came time to kind of talk to your husband and try to put your marriage back together and that whole 9 yards?
So with my husband, I did more of this thing of testing the waters, where I first kind of told him that I had been doing it, but he didn't really understand the extent of how I'd been doing it. So it was more of baby steps of letting him in and letting him see it. And he had dealt with addiction himself right out of high school. So he had this place of like, I understand that this is what's happening, but I also want you to know that if you ever hide like this again from me, or because there were so many lies. When you have addiction, you have lies. And so he was basically at the point where he was like, I understand and I'm here for you, but we can't go down this road again. And I remember the first month feeling on a super high. I was like, I'm doing it. I feel so good. I'm doing this. And then it comes to a point where the trauma pops back up. And now you have to figure out how you're going to deal with the trauma without your old habits and without. So there were a lot of times where it was messy, and I ended up actually enrolling in a class that started to teach me how to use my intuition and to start to teach me how to use these tools for, because when you come off of things like drugs, my experience was it was almost like every nerve in my body was firing off at the same time. And so walking even just to like a gas station or a grocery store, just hypersensitive, and all you want to do is like numb those nerves again. So that part was really uncomfortable for me, and I had to be alone a lot. But I went, that's where I started meditating, and I started going inward, and I started doing these new healthy tools to replace my old ones that I used to fall back on. I started having like a morning routine where I would wake up and I would do my first 30 minutes, and I would dedicate it to myself instead of getting on my phone or mixing other people's energy. And that helped me to start realizing I can process this and not feel like I'm being depleted or that I can't have the things I once had to help me. I was now seeing it as I no longer need those tools because I'm starting to understand I'm greater than those. And I ultimately can do a much better job than what I was using them for. And it also came with like a self-compassion of like, I had to be compassionate with myself of course that's what I did. I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to cope with it any better. And that self-compassion was honestly one of the messiest parts for me because I was so used to judging myself for everything that I'd ever done to really come from a place of like, of course that's what you did and that's okay. Like that compassion was really messy for me. And once I allowed myself to do that, it opened up like a whole nother thing for me. Yeah.
So under all of this, under all of the out and the vulnerability that is putting out, what do you hear inside when you're doing this? Because it's this whoom, everything to the surface. Mm-hmm. But there's right here, you're hearing this, you're feeling this, what's going on inside? Like even right now in this moment, while all of this is coming out.
I'm getting in a spot where I'm letting go of the fear to be seen. And I'm getting in a place where it feels so fucking empowering to know nothing else has a hold on me. That all my outside noise no longer matters. That the judgments of people no longer matter. And I really feel like my calling in this life is to show people they can do the same thing. And it doesn't need to look the same way for them. It can look in however they want it to look. But the fear needs to stop. The fear has been keeping us down. And it's really shifted me out of that fear that I was taught of with living in religion to shame everything that I had, that I was. And it came from now I'm coming from a place of like, fuck yeah, this is what I am. It's freaking empowering. Like it's teaching me to love myself on a whole like another deep level. And I feel like when people show up authentic, you can feel it. You can't fake authenticity. You feel it. And so that's why I really feel like, especially on a public like standpoint where I'm coming up on these public platforms and I'm showing people, it's because I know that they can feel it. And now that I'm in a place where I'm able to feel myself and I'm not numbing anymore, I can feel it. And it's teaching me to, it's leading me to places that were meant for me. It's leading me to people who are meant for me. It's leading me to paths of energy that loves and adores me and appreciates everything I am instead of just tolerating who I am. And being able to feel seen is what everybody wants ultimately. Being loved is what everybody wants ultimately. And so it's just teaching me on so many different levels to do that for myself. And then there's like another creator part of this, right? Where you start to recognize all the fear of all the things that you've ever been taught. You were taught that there was only these certain steps in life. Like you go to college, you get married, you have babies, you get a job for 40 hours a week. And it started to shift all that of like, just because someone told me so, is that what it has to be like? And I'm starting to break out of all these boxes that I've put myself in. And I'm getting to feel the essence of who I am.
What would you say is the most recent box? Like if we look at that, all the different things that societal norms and the things that we have to be and this normal structure and flow of life that has been set up for us by other people. And what is the most recent way that you feel like you've kind of shifted that or broken out of something in that space?
So I have a couple that come to mind. The body shame for one. Definitely learning to love my body in what it looks like and not be ashamed of like, I can't wear shorts because my thighs don't look like that. Or if I were to go to a swimming pool and I'm wearing a bikini and someone makes a comment about it, normally that would have destroyed me. And I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I'm starting to recognize that it's a projection, right? So people who are going to judge me for my own body, like my body things, it's a projection of how they feel. So I'm starting to recognize I'm not those judgments they have for themselves. And just because they have those things doesn't make me have shame about it. So today I showed up in shorts. I've never, like, for years and years and years, I've never worn shorts because I've been ashamed of my thighs. I don't get on social media and do videos because I'm like, well, if I don't look the idea of how I think people want me to look, they're not going to listen to the words that I have to say. My words aren't important. So this is a pattern that is definitely, I can feel I'm breaking out of right now. And I know that I'm breaking out of it because it gets loudest right before you break out. So with people who are struggling with this as well, just any time that you're trying to break a pattern that you've carried from your past, it'll always get loudest right before you break out of it. And so I know body shame is definitely one of the biggest ones for me right now.
I think like my experience is shifting and changing patterns and breaking out of those things. And really, I mean, the perspective that I take on it is the evolution of just humans, right? And the way that we evolve over the course of our life. And I like that you say that it gets louder. For me, it gets like it just feels more chaotic. So like as shift happens, I just heard it. I didn't plan that, but suddenly I need a t-shirt. But as that takes place, it seems like everything's falling apart. It seems extremely chaotic. It seems like just recently I was talking with a friend of mine and I was telling him about the beginning of this year. I was at a point in my life where it felt like the wheels were really starting to come off, and like to the point where 3 flat tires and the 4th one is like on a fucking axle and we're about ready to just, roll right into the ditch. And it seems like that and it feels like that, but I can eventually get out of that and I can look back, or even sometimes in the thick of it, feeling that way, I still can have some awareness of like, oh yeah, this is the evolutionary growth process and the change that takes place, because I've experienced it before, unfortunately. But it's always a good thing. It's always a good thing. And that's what it's been like for me this year. Probably like the last 2 years or 3 years, or I don't know. What would you say, babe? 4 years? 5 years? How about 7.5 years? The last 7 3/4 years has...
My rotors have learned how to walk. We're like... Yeah. It's been a bit.
It sucks. It gets really loud and really chaotic.
Definitely.
That brought me also peace. Just the way you phrased it, I was like, oh, I'm really loud right now. And you have the awareness, how when you have the awareness of things, you're like, I know this is because of growth. I know I'm on the brink of something. I know something's coming, but then you hear it a different way and then you feel it. You're like, oh, it's really loud. This is exciting. So hearing that.
What do you do when it gets really loud
Yeah.
or really chaotic? Like, how do you keep your head above water in those moments?
I try to lean in even more, to be honest with you. I do a lot of reflecting. Journaling is like one of my main ways that I'm able to really tap into things that I'm not conscious of, to help bring that up and the whys of what that is. And I'm also in this place of recognizing so often I feel I'm pretty stubborn and I feel like I know what's best for me a lot of times. So if I see something in life that I think I want, I get hyper focused on it. I'm like, okay, this is for me, this is for me, this is for me. And I think that it's for me. Well, if the universe comes in and shows me something else, this is where it gets loud and chaotic. This is where, you're like, it teaches me to kind of go within myself, and I have to look at, why am I holding on to this so deeply? And ultimately there's fear behind that. There's fear of letting go of my comforts to embrace the greater unknowns, because I know ultimately the universe will always give me things that are so much greater than I could even fathom. So I kind of look at it as like the Tower card in tarot, or the Death card in tarot, where in order to bring those things that are in higher alignment for your next level up, for your next who you're stepping in to be, you need to drop the dead, stagnant energy. You can't take that with you. It's taking up the room of the things that are ultimately better for you. And so I see it as a cycle of like the death and rebirth, or the Tower, the crumbling of everything that what once was, all your comforts. And it sucks. Like when we let go of comforts, it's not easy. It's not an easy process at all. So ultimately recognizing, oh shit, it's getting really loud, but I'm about to clear out all this stuff and I can't even imagine what's about to come in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where are you? Because there's so much love output. You're putting out on all these different channels and all this self-improvement and helping so many people and seeing it and self-reflecting within yourself and giving love to yourself, which is beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. But so you have these walls that are coming down on, I can be seen. I can be seen. I am not afraid to be seen. but how much of, and like keeping negative things out, like not letting that penetrate, but where are you letting love in?
I love that you're tapping on this, because this is something that I struggle with, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been I give, but this is something that's come into my awareness in this last week, because I had some dramatic things happened that made me really upset, made me really angry. And I ultimately had to sit there and recognize I was upset and I was disappointed because I was putting love into relationships that I ultimately wanted that love given back to me in that way. And so that was a moment. I went to the mountains last week, and I ultimately had to sit with myself and say, you feel depleted and angry and bitter because you've been giving this love to all these other people, but you're not turning back and giving it to yourself. So that's why I'm saying, like, the self-love is layered and layered and layered. I think that I get it. I'm like, yeah, I'm on to self-love. And then something else pops up and I'm like, oh shit, I'm still at the beginning stages.
Yeah.
And another challenge that I'm having right now is ultimately to trust people. Because I get to a point where I allow people to see me only as safe as I feel to be seen. And then I shut them off. I shut them down.
Yeah.
So this is something that I'm figuring out. I honestly don't know the answer to it right now. But I know that I'm getting closer than I've been before, and so that feels good.
Have you identified what... Are you okay?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I'm like, I got a question quick. Anyways, question. Have you identified what your trust issues are, or where they stem from?
My mother.
Anywhere else? And it's not like I'm not interested in necessarily diving in and picking apart the dynamics of where that may or may not be, right? But I think that ultimately, right, self-love's important, of course, right? But also that ability to let other people love you and let the love of other people in.
Yes.
And kind of on the same capacity and on the same level, right? Not just a matter of loving ourselves as much as somebody else loves us, but allowing that person to love us that much and allowing that person to see us that much.
Yeah.
And like you said, you have to trust. And so maybe, of course, some trust with mom, some issues with trust with mom for obvious reasons. Can you think of any other areas? And you don't have to answer. It's just kind of in the back of your mind.
I definitely know my relationship with women, and I'm sure that started out in like junior high, where this was made aware to me too when I got into my class for learning about my intuition, because there was 8 women in that container, and we got really vulnerable and had to share traumas and get really personal. And once I was able to see in that container, there is such a thing as sacred sisterhood, and to start seeing that shifted for me, but I wasn't aware of that wound until I was in that class. So I know that I definitely have wounds as far as like women can't be trusted. They're always against you. They're going to take the information that you give them or the trust that you give them, and as soon as they can use it for their benefit, they're going to do that. These are old stories that I've been telling myself. So there's definitely some wounds there.
What about men?
Men is definitely a thing. I know really early on, about 6th grade or 7th grade, I started behaving in a way that I wanted to be seen and to be loved ultimately, with the boys that were around me at that time. And I looked for it. I went about it in all the wrong ways, sexuality and what you see in like, the media or pornography even. I molded to what I thought they were looking for. And I always wanted to be the cool girl. I didn't want to be the girl that caused drama. I always wanted to be the cool girlfriend. And so I did have a lot of wounds there as well, because I never showed up as myself. I always, that's really where I started to mold to fit what I think they wanted. And I actually carried that up with me up until about around the time I met my husband. And that's when that shifted for me. And I realized I've always just kind of formed into whatever relationship I've been with. Whatever boyfriend I had at that time, I turned into the person that he wanted me to be, whether it was I'm going to be a dirt bike girl, or I'm going to be a churchy girl, or I'm going to be... And so I definitely have a lot of trauma, especially with like sexual experiences from junior high and high school. Yeah.
So earlier you said like trust when it comes to women equals this. Women are going to use this, that against you, so on and so forth. What is it for men? So trust equals what with men? My
value is only for my body. I'm not meant to be seen or heard. I'm not smart. They know better. Those are probably the deepest, like, solid ones I can think of.
Yeah.
Is there some abandonment in there?
Definitely. Yeah.
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 Trust is so funny, isn't it?
That's one way
hilarious.
to put it. You trust. Ha. It's a good joke.
Well, it's like, I mean, I don't know if I've ever sat and thought about just that word or that concept or that idea, like in a super, not just deep way, but the multitude of layers involved with trust. Because there's like layers of trust, right? There's amount, I mean, it's almost like on a scale of 1 to 10, like we let certain people have, you know, level 3 trust and level 5 trust, and very few people ever get like level 10 trust. How much do you trust yourself?
This is something I'm learning. So a year ago, I would have told you not at all. That's why I'm saying, like, when I went to Arizona, I really felt like my inner compass broke, because from that moment going forward, I never trusted myself. Whatever my gut was telling me, I was like, no, it's wrong, no, it's wrong, no, it's wrong. So that's really why it's been so empowering for me to start doing things like meditation and to really connect to my intuition. So when it does pop up, I can recognize that it's intuition. And not only that, but I can recognize it's not trauma. Because lots of times you can get intuition and trauma confused. Trauma will tell you, hey, this is going to keep you safe. This is going to keep you safe. Red flag, red flag, red flag. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be an intuition. So a lot of times people get those two things confused. And I feel like meditation has been the key in letting me see, okay, you think this is intuition, but it's actually a trauma response popping up, that this is something that you need to heal. And that was one of the biggest shifts for me, I think, just being able to like differentiate between the two of those. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a big one. That is one that I still struggle with, because it is deep.
Mm-hmm.
It is deep. And those trauma responses are
tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Very tricky.
Yeah.
I had one last week where I was like, it was an ego thing, and it was trying to tell me it was loyalty. It was loyalty. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't loyalty. This is my ego like stepping in and telling me that it's a loyalty issue. But it comes in tricky ways always. Like, it's just interesting how the mind can do that, you know?
Very.
It's all survival, right? I mean, those trauma responses are coming in to trigger survival. And so then it's like, well, I have to trust it because it's there for my survival.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based off of that survival response. But then it's like really learning how to even just hear your actual intuition, as well as like being able to connect to the greater intuition of what exists out there is it's very hard. Besides meditation, what do you do to try to tap into that?
Yeah.
Do you have other things that you like? Other things that you try when it comes to trying to connect to that?
Dancing is a really good one. Journaling, getting out in nature. I need nature, like I need air. So getting out in nature really helps me connect in, clear my head. That's probably my number one thing I use as well when I've been on social media too much, because I'll get in these waves of like, I'm on fire and I'm on social media, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I feel completely shitty. Why do I feel so awful? And I'm like, you know why? Just go to the mountains. It's like recharge yourself, reset. So, yeah, places like that help me remember who I am and get clear. What about you?
What do I do? I think a lot.
Jiu-jitsu is a big one for you.
Well, right now it is, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the question now that I asked you.
You're like, what was that question?
No, it's like, how do I connect to not just my intuition? I trust my intuition a lot. Like there's two layers of it where I tend to trust my gut quite well. And truth be, I mean, I've done that maybe my whole life. Felt pretty confident in trusting my gut. So I have like years of experience of kind of like, this feels right. What if it's not? It's okay. We'll figure it out. And definitely made mistakes and done dumb shit. But at the same time, really important things, I tend to have a pretty good dial on trusting that. The part that I think, because I'm looking at it from two perspectives, right? Like trusting my own intuition versus connecting to the universe and trusting that connection. And I used to trust that connection more than I trusted my own intuition. And now it's like flipped to where I trust my own intuition more than I kind of, not necessarily don't trust that universal connection, but that doesn't feel as strong right now. It feels much more strong, kind of trusting my own intuition. So things that I do, like, it's like super basic. Like if I'm healthy and if I feel healthy, it's easier for me to connect and feel and kind of trust. So it's like super, like I drink a lot of water. I try to sleep as much as I can and go to bed at a decent time. And definitely like physical activity. If I'm eating the things that I know are, you know, not just healthy for me, but that are healthy for my body and that feel good for my body, all of these things make it much, much easier for me to feel like I know what's going on with my body and I can trust my intuition as well as kind of my physical body. But lately I've been really yearning for that deeper connection to the universe, because I've had that kind of like probably like a deluge of that connection, and I miss it. And it doesn't feel like a waterfall now. It feels kind of like, it feels like sprinklers where they aren't there and then they hit you in the face.
They blast you.
And then it's not there and then it hits you in the face. And so, I don't know, like lately I've been getting up early in the morning, and I used to lay in bed and try to sleep longer. And then, but like lately it's just recognizing that that's when my body wants to get up. And so I'm going to get up, and just being in the quiet of the morning is I guess it's like a spiritual practice for me. And I hate phrasing it that way because it seems silly, because I'm not doing anything other than just
listening to your body.
Well, yeah, but it's like I'm not getting up and I'm not meditating. I'm not journaling. I have intention to journal. The last few mornings when I've been waking up, I'm like, I got to get my fucking journal out. I want to journal. And I don't. But it's being in that moment in the morning is a special place for me for whatever reason. And I don't care why. I just feel it. And so I like it. And that feels connected to the universe somehow. That also doesn't feel like a valid answer.
Of course it was a valid answer.
I meditate. No, I don't. I like to meditate, but I haven't in a while.
I think when we talk about meditation, people get this like idea of what meditation looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, once I got out of the box of like, okay, you're supposed to quiet your mind. You're not supposed to let anything in. The second a thought comes up, you like retract it and go back to your point of focus. But meditation can pop up in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. My journaling is meditation. Walking through the forest is meditation. My dancing is meditation. Getting up in the morning and just being is meditation. Mm-hmm. You don't need to actively like sit and say, okay, this moment I'm meditating. It's a flow. It doesn't need to be so like black and white. Yeah, so I think those are beautiful answers, because we've been made to believe that it's so hard to connect, but it really is so simple. It's just right there. We just need to open the door to allow it to come in.
What are you doing right now, babe? First do
no
own internal intuition, and then connecting to the greater.
I was really paused on that. I'm gonna have to sit with that one, because I feel like when I'm connected and I don't notice. I haven't seen it as a separation of, is it me or the universe? It feels
the same.
I don't know if it feels the same, or I just saw it as it just flows. It just is. I know that when I'm not connected to my intuition, I'm also like, I'm not willing to listen either. So I don't recognize a separation in it. But I will kind of look and see, is there something to that? Is there something to that? But I don't know. I like baths. I take baths that are so good when I'm creating things, when I'm creating oils, when I'm creating just like things, when I feel very connected in that space. That recharges, and alone. When I have alone time, that's good. That's really good. There can be music, there can be nothing. But sometimes it's powerful and it's all these thoughts and I'm really going in, and sometimes it's complete tune out. I am putting on something and I'm just going to let my brain take a break. So those are my good ones. I used to run away to the mountains. There was a couple of spots where I would like run away to. And I remember years ago when I was in like really bad situations, I would also run away to the mountains and I would scream because there was so much and I could hear the screaming. I haven't done that in a long time and I should do that. Wow, I had something and now my brain is like, whoa, it's gone. It went with the separation between self and universe.
I like the idea that it isn't separate. That to me makes way more sense.
I don't know. I got lost there. I did take a little break.
If you do, I think that you're on something there though, because if you view it in a way of we are source energy, you are not separate. So I actually can relate to that because I feel like that's exactly what happens is it channels through me. I am it. I'm not separate from it.
Yeah.
So that definitely relates, I feel. And the screaming at the top of the mountains, I can tell you right now, there's nothing like a good sweat. You hike at the top of the mountain and then you let out these like Tarzan, belts or whatever. It feels so freaking good just to release it. Yeah.
That's going to be my goal. I'm going to do that again soon because I definitely need some screaming out there. It feels so good. It feels so good. Even if it's like the freedom of expression without repercussions, without judgments, you don't have to hold anything back. You don't have to be afraid. It's like all of this that you've been like holding on to just gets to come out in this like huge, and it can be painful and it just like burns. There's times afterwards you can't talk. You get a little bit of blood in your throat because it's intense, but it's this most amazing like cleansing. It's everything tingles after. Yeah, I miss that. I'm gonna have to start that again. When did you feel, because of all the stuff that we go through, and then when we get onto this journey and here we are and we're healing ourselves and working on ourselves, and that's also a thing that people think there's a finish line and there's not.
No.
So quit trying to finish line, myself included. I'm like, okay, I did it. I was like, whoo. But when you started working with people and others and helping them on that journey, where did you feel, I'll do what you do. I'm going to give context. I waited a long time before I started working with people. And then when I did, it was very small. I would keep it very short. I was always like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not there. Even though it's not you, it channels through, but you're just like, there's no way I can't do this. I haven't been doing it long enough. I'm not healed enough. And then you hear healers that can be negative and I don't even get upset anymore. And just like how good they are and how much work they've done so they don't experience any of these negative things. And one day you can too. And that goes out there and it causes people so much damage. But that did me as well. So I love that you're like, yeah, I'm going through shit. I'm in the process. And you still, like, when did you know that it was okay for you to work with people and you didn't have to be healed to start helping?
I had a really good mentor actually that's really early on in our class. She was like, listen, you're going to have all these things pop up that are going to tell you you're not good enough and you can't hold it and your shit's too heavy, but you can. Yeah. And she showed us it every week by showing up, and she would be like, she actually was like a really good example to me of like, she'd show up and be like, hey guys, my energy's off. And her just like owning that and saying that, we all could feel it. So whether or not she actually owned it or said it, we'd all know anyway. So honestly, it was her, like, she inspired me to be like, okay, even though you don't feel like you're ready, put yourself out there, because the only way that this is going to grow is by trial and error. And I have this thing where I don't like to show up unless I can show up perfect. And I don't like to show up unless I know exactly what I'm doing. So the beginning was really rocky for me because I'd have a session and I'd beat myself up for 5 days after it, thinking of all the things that I looked like I just looked so silly, and that they probably don't think that I'm connected and they probably will never come back to me. And I would have these like vicious cycles that would start. And so I'd start just bringing my awareness to it, start rewiring it, start restating it, and just ultimately allow myself to be totally uncomfortable, because it was so uncomfortable at the beginning, so uncomfortable. And then, like I said, people can feel the authenticity in it. So if you're out there and you're like, I'm a light worker, everything's hunky-dory, I'm not going through anything, let me bless you with my vibes. Like, you're going to feel the falsity in that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of easier for me. And I think it's just because I had such a good mentor show me that. Yeah.
Remember, the most powerful thing that came to is like, you're broken is, and that's just like but you're broken is what gave you this power. You can connect all these pieces in you is how you can see and recognize so much. And so many people, okay, my words are getting all messed up, but just feeling that, like, that's where, like, cause you can feel them, and you can feel it on different levels. And so much of it, how yourself does go somewhere else. It really does. There's times it'll pops back in. You're like, oh, hello. No, thank you right now. You got to sit over here. But just feeling like all of the things that were my reasons why I wasn't good enough, even though there was this here, it was like, you know, you knew here's this thing, here's always this thing that's pushing. And then that ego and all that fear and all that limited, all that pain, all that trauma response that keeps you protected, that keeps you away from that comes in and stops that. And that's like, oh, that's where it all is. That was such a powerful moment for me. I still struggle. There's still times that I'm like, whew, you know, second guessing things and hoping that things went okay. But for the time in the sessions, there isn't struggle.
Yes.
When you're with them, there isn't struggle. All that shit comes after when all the ego comes back in. So if you're wondering, like, if you think you're broken is reason for you to not shine, that is false. Go shine. That's how all the light comes in.
Can you imagine if we had to wait for like the one perfect fucking human to be able to like help people? Like, because like Steph and I are both in therapy right now, and obviously both of our therapists have fucking issues, right? And imagine if we had to wait until the perfect fucking therapist came along that was totally healed, had no issues, had all of their shit together.
Thank God.
And then at that point they could become a therapist. There would be no therapist.
There would be zero.
Yeah. Nobody would get any help.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another thing too of like, oh God, I just heard it recently. Because oftentimes, because this was a thing that made a lot of sense in my head. And I really liked it when they were talking about it. It was on a podcast I was listening today. And like the idea, it was in relation to jujitsu. And oftentimes you get really good at jujitsu. And then when you start teaching jujitsu, you get even better because you start to really look at the fundamentals and you have to figure out a way to explain why they need to do this, that, or the other, right? So it's like the reason you do this with your right arm is because it then creates this. So you really have to pick apart what you're doing. And by teaching that to somebody else, it makes you better at that skill. So, you know, you take your jujitsu and you just like level up super fast when you start teaching it. And I heard that. I'm like, I totally know that. And I've experienced that. And like, you can see that a lot. And then I was sitting there thinking about like life coaches and therapists and all these kind of different things that people do to work with other people that are centered around creating a more balanced, healthy life for that person. In the process of doing that, it's, you know, leveling up your own skill set for life itself as well. So it's the same, obviously, as this little silly metaphor of jiu-jitsu, but it made so much sense to me thinking about it in that context. And I think about how much I like helping people and how much I like working with people and how often it's like I'll say something or something will come to me in the process of trying to explain something to somebody. And then I'm like, that makes total sense and is super applicable to where I'm at right now. And I'm going to immediately implement it into like the source code of Craig to try to do the same thing.
When it comes out in channels, you're like, all right, I hear it too.
Yeah.
Well played. Well played, universe.
So it's necessary. It's not a matter of like waiting until you're healed enough or waiting until you're skilled enough or whatever the case may be. Like it's necessary. It's part of the process, I think.
Yeah. Most of the time I find myself like giving advice to clients or whatnot. It really is like I needed to hear this just as badly. And I feel like that medicine finds you, like the clients that you have come to you. I tell my clients this all the time. They're helping me as much as I'm helping them. they're bringing their own medicine, even though they don't see it. They're technically paying me to help them with their life. Like we're coming together because we're meant to give each other the healing medicine that we have, and connected, it plays both ways. It's never one-sided. So just because you're labeled a coach or whatnot there's still so much healing magic in it. And I do feel like embracing it and flowing with it, if you were perfect right off the bat, like if your therapist was totally fine, 100% good to go, it would almost make them like not relatable. Mm-hmm. And so the power behind what they're showing you or they're teaching you wouldn't be there, because you wouldn't be feeling it. And for me, I'm such a feely person. If I don't feel it, I'm not going to do it. I need to be 100% yes, full body, everything. Like, so I don't know.
I agree. I have to fix this. Hair's going all over.
What is the what you just described or just talked about, like the energy exchange that takes place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's never one-sided, right? Every interaction that we have with people, everything that we kind of go through, there's always that exchange. What do you feel like, I mean, we've been hanging out for the last little bit. What do you feel like what's that exchange been like for you coming here and doing this podcast with us? Like, what have you, and it may be something that you have to, because sometimes it is after the fact that we kind of hit awareness. And
mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to be processing this for a while. So if I answer it right now, like right off the bat, what I want to say is it feels good to be offered a safe space where people are genuinely interested in having a conversation. That's not an everyday occurrence. You don't come across that every day, where people can hear your frequency you're putting out. So often I talk to people and I'm speaking this frequency and they're speaking this frequency. And so we don't really get it. So it's more of like a chance of being able to like actually connect from my heart. And that's right off the bat. It's a connection of the heart. It feels so freaking good. And to miss opportunities for that, I don't want to do that. So that's ultimately why I came here, is to connect from the heart and just see what creation came out of it. But I know that there will definitely be a lot of takeaways. Like I'll sit with this and there will be a lot. So I'll have to get back to you on that one.
On your spiritual path and journey, not everybody, but the majority of people go down the rabbit holes and they start chasing different thought processes, different modalities, different things, different ideas to see what resonates and connects with them. And they find themselves believing differently than they have in the past and thinking new thoughts and new ideas, and all this kind of stuff just takes place, right? This is like a silly question. I should have prefaced it beforehand. What is the craziest thing that you have encountered? And by crazy, I mean, that's the wrong word, but like the most bizarre, wacky thing that you may, like somebody who isn't like the lay person, the normal, quote unquote, even though they're not fucking normal, but the person out there that isn't
I get what you're saying,
would look at that and be like, oh my God, that's straight fucking nuts. That woman's crazy. So what's the craziest thing? I want to hear what yours is, and I'm going to tell you mine.
Probably channeling what people view as like ETs and things like that.
When you say ETs, I know what you mean, but you have to take into consideration.
So different dimensional beings and different energies. There's this thing called light language, light language and light codes. So I draw light codes often. People think that that's super strange, but I also speak light language. And that has probably been my most, I get a lot of faces with that one. So that's actually, I keep it more sacred to my heart. I only share it when I feel really like inspired to share it publicly. And I'll share it with people that have shown me that it's kind of like safe to do, but that's definitely like the most bizarre thing, like just right off the bat. And I actually remember this because when I first came across it, I remember watching the people who were speaking it. And I just remember thinking, you guys are being ridiculous. Do you have any idea how stupid you look right now? But I kept finding myself going back. So like there was something that I recognized in it, some truth that I recognized in it. And even though from like an ego standpoint, I was making fun of them, I kept returning, I kept watching, I kept listening. So what about for you?
Let's see. It's so funny because some of them, like there's a difference for me between a thought or an idea and a belief. And some of them are random thoughts and ideas. And if I hold on to a thought and idea long enough and kind of kick it around and sit with it and resonates with me over time, then it kind of morphs and turns into a belief. And so a lot of these are beliefs nowadays. So they don't seem weird to me at all. I was sitting there thinking, like, I remember at the beginning of, like, quote unquote, my spiritual journey, I would channel stuff and wake up in the middle of the night and have to pull my notebook out and start writing shit down. And we'd come up with, I say we, because a lot of times it was Steph trying to help me interpret whatever it was or figure this out or figure that out. And like I used to have phrases that would come to me that were super bizarre, and I would write them down in like regular our alphabet, but then they weren't like language or words. And then sometimes we could find some sort of meaning to them. There was not Sumerian, Akkadian. Yeah, Akkadian language. And that was like a super old, not society, culture back in the day. So there was some of that stuff. I haven't done that in a long time and haven't kind of tapped into that space. But it's stuff like, I mean, I think that I don't just think that there's other dimensions. So it's not like, you know, oh, maybe there's multiple dimensions. And so I don't just I 100% believe that not only are there other dimensions, but there's an endless amount of dimensions and they're all intertwined with each other. And so like right now, there's a dimension where the energy that is Craig in this dimension here that you're talking to and that's speaking on this podcast, that energy is also in some other dimension as a wolf and just being a wolf and doing like wolfy shit. And then like there's also, I'm super watery and ocean stuff. So like definitely a dolphin somewhere, all sorts of different stuff. Like I have wings in other dimensions. It's all encompassing in regards to kind of the vastness of what my energy is and all of these other space-time continuums. But that's not like a thought, or that's not like something that I just believe that. And it's not something that I kind of question anymore or think about. I'm just like, yeah, that's just what it is. But I don't think it's weird. I used to think it was weird.
I know you did.
I used to think it was very strange, and I kind of wouldn't talk a lot about it. And it's not like I talk a lot about it now because it's not something, it just is. Like it's normal to me. And so it's not confusing for me. So like if I have a dream where I feel connected to, you know, I've dreamt or had meditative experiences or some sort of spiritual experience where you're tapped into some other flow or whatever, and I connect with an animal, or I feel like I'm an animal. Like I had one not too long ago where I thought I was a frog. I've always had like frog energy and connected to frogs and stuff like that. That isn't some crazy thought that just makes me feel good, or that isn't information from some past life. None of that. For me, it's just all at the same time. It's just different dimensions. And I don't even think dimensions are the right word to describe it. But that's the extent of the word that I have at this time to describe it. What's your craziest one, babe? Do you have one?
I don't have a crazy one. I haven't like had something like that. I'm like, oh,
you got some crazy ones.
Hear me out. That's my fear right there. It doesn't seem crazy to me because things have been there, and then they build and they build. And so all these weird things don't seem crazy to me. But I am terrified of you thinking I'm crazy, and you think like, I'm like, I sound insane. And so I hold so much back because it doesn't seem like, it's not a surprise to me, but I think I'm going to be put in the loony bin for it.
I can relate deeply with this. Like when my light language hit and my like codes started coming in, my husband was like, don't do that shit around me. Like, don't do that shit around me. And so I started feeling this of like, you really are starting to think I'm crazy. And then I started to feel myself be like, oh, you can't show that part of yourself. Oh, you can't. So I totally can relate like to, and I know how things are crazy because the look of people's faces when I'm talking to them about it. Like if they're looking crazy, then I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't, you know, but you get to a point, and I kind of think that the dimension thing, this kind of plays into, we're understanding that time is like this, right? And then we start to recognize that time's not linear, time doesn't exist, that we are fractals living in all different types of places, having different experiences all at the same time. And once you recognize that, you're like, oh my God, that's so powerful. And then you start to think, all the people who believe that time is linear, or like the phrase past life. I refer to past lives all the time, and it just makes me giggle because I'm like, it's not a past life. You're living it right now. But I think it's the steps of being able to comprehend. You start to see things as past life, and then it opens a gate to comprehend past lives. And I got to a point where I was like, oh, past lives isn't a normal thing that people believe in. That's freaking weird, because it makes way more sense to me. And then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I got to past life so I could understand that it's actually all happening now. But it was like the steps that it took to get me to understand it's all an expression happening right now. Yeah.
It's like math, right? We learn 1 + 2 before we can do advanced trigonometry.
Yeah.
What's your craziest, babe?
I've got one now.
Let's hear it.
Because you're saying that, I'm like, okay, there's one there was a surprise to me. And it's when I've been in traumatic times. And like, 'cause it's easy to go in so many places and to be there. And when I connect to that and the words that came, like I will have got phrases that I had said then. I'm like, oh, here's this. And that was to keep going. And then I feel that energy later. And here's that energy. And I realize, and I concentrate, I'm connecting with me back then. And so that's where it came from. And so I got it from I'm like, oh God, that sounds crazy. But it was just like that energy. So I really embody it when that comes up. And I feel like I can connect and give that message. And so that one was a little.
Are you giving a message to Steph in that traumatic experience? Is that what you're saying? Or are you getting a message from the Steph in the traumatic experience?
Giving one to that experience. And so, like, yeah, if we have the linear, then it would be a double and back. But because it's all.
Yeah, no linear.
Then it's.
Just all circles.
Yeah.
I like
that. Was one that surprised me because I didn't expect that. I'm like, oh, that came from. Okay.
That's fucking magic. Hold on. I'm totally understanding what you're just saying now because I had a hard time.
That's magic. You're like, I finally understand you, woman.
No. So you can remember moments in your life, specifically, well, most commonly moments that were shitty traumatic experiences. And in those moments, having thoughts come to you or hearing things in those moments being said to yourself, right? And now today, or in this present moment space, Steph.
Well, not right now.
Well, not this exact moment, right? But you have the awareness of that you are saying something now and having a memory of what, baby, that's fucking like, that's brain broke.
That one surprised me.
I like that one. That's really good. That's really, really good.
Thank you.
What if all that inner tuition or inner
intuition?
No, tuition for college. What if all of that inner voice shit that we get is really future versions of ourselves?
You've already thought that.
Have I already thought that?
Yeah. You're telling me you believe that we are guiding ourselves.
Yeah, I do.
So
I really do.
And yes, there's like, I know that there's things that.
But the things that are this, if you're just listening, we're waving our hands around in
all
the air.
of the ethos.
That's you as well, right? So
I guess if we're all one, it is. But there's definitely things that I connect to, and that things that have come to me that I don't know if my brain can do that.
The easiest way for me to think about it is water.
Yeah.
Right. So like, here's the water in my cup. It's almost out, a couple of droplets, right? Same water that's in the ocean. However, they're vastly different, but they're comprised of the same thing. So I'm part of everything, but then at the same time, I can also be an individual. I can be a small thing. But if you put me back into the ocean, then I become the ocean.
I get the concept. I've just had some pretty powerful, like for instance, I will share one. I had never, and if I had, it wasn't in my consciousness, have heard of Lilith. And now I feel like, how could I not have? And she came to me and gave me her name. And I was trying to look her everywhere up. I'm like, what angel is that? Like, what arcane? Like, yeah, I learned. But the power and the love and the amazing and how that connection with her, I'm like, so that's where I'm like, that's not me. That is
It feels something
so amazing. I don't even know how to describe it. And so there's a different, like my stomach is just like right now. There's a different sense of when somebody, I'm going to get emotional. Wow. When somebody, or like that kind of power, I don't know how to say it. All these words don't make sense. I don't know how to describe it. That kind of, when she showed up and she has been with me and other things show up in that space, it is a different sensation. It is different. It's like when you're sitting, it's different. You know how you can feel the energy change in a room. You can feel the atmosphere change when you're out there and there's something that comes up that you need to be aware of or something shifts. It's this sense that just like changes and wakens you and you feel it and you can taste it and you're smelling it and it's all that. And so that's a different presence as when there's times that phrases come in and feelings come in and senses come in and audible comes in. And so these things that have came in and these messages I have connected to in future times, in present times, and to use that. And that feels where I can connect it as me. But to say like in that moment, like that wasn't me. I'm connected and I feel connected, but that wasn't me. Does that make sense? Or did I just go?
Makes total sense, babe.
Yeah, like your energy is almost like you're comfortable with it. It's a familiar energy where if you have Lilith show up, it's going to be like an energy you've never experienced before. And I feel like I have to ask you, when she visited you for your first time, was it in the bathtub?
I was sitting, I had just had, this is where it happened, but I remember like I came out, had the bath. It wasn't in the bathtub, but I was very much in I was having a hard time. I was having a hard time. And I came out and it's like our bathroom and our bedroom are connected. And I was sitting down. I just sat on the floor, which was weird. And I just sat and there was a mirror and I was just sitting there. And all of a sudden her name came in and everything shifted. And it was like, whoo, like I felt it. And then more stuff kind of happened after that can be out. So I wouldn't have connected that. So no, it didn't happen in the bathtub, but there was a sinking in that happened in the bathtub and it happened after. Mm-hmm. You have a story. One of my strongest
connections with her happened when I did an intentional goddess bath, is what I like to call them. And I put flower petals in it. I put certain essential oils in it. I bless it with Reiki. And then I set the intention for, whatever energy to come in that I need to work with. And my experience with Lilith also brought me to tears. It made me feel... It was the fire that I had been looking for, but in the most sacred of ways. Not in a fire aspect of what my brain considers fire energy. So I almost feel like Lilith came into me to show me fire energy is actually incredible, and this is what it's going to feel like. And I also didn't know who she was. So once I found out who she was and the stories that have been put out about her versus my experience with her, I knew in that very moment I was supposed to be working with her. Like she brought me a key or a piece that I was missing, and she's powerful. She's powerful. Yeah. Lilith.
That does so much of that information too. It was just like, I'm like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. I was talking to you about it too. I'm like, I'm finding all these things. Like, that's not it. Mm-mm. That's not it. Because that, and then, you have to dig, and then you start, and then it's.
Cassity, thank you so much.
You're so welcome, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. What is the easiest and best way for people to find you?
I am at the Zen Den Utah. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah.
All the fun places. Very, very cool.
Yeah. What do you do? Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So I'm an intuitive healer. I do things like Reiki, sound baths. I do aura photography. Oh. I do like limiting belief and reprogramming and things like that. One-on-one coaching. I teach workshops and classes, and I also do retreats. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me,
You're gonna
guys.
have to come back on the podcast.
Oh, I would totally be down.
Cute.